Welcome to another episode of Jack Amplified. I am your host, Michael Braithwaite. I have the great honor and pleasure of being the CEO and president at Jack.org. What does that mean? Not a heck of a lot, because the young people at our organization are wonderfully talented staff. They do the heavy lifting week in and week out. It is all about early intervention, prevention, peer support across the country. On this podcast, we focus on all sorts of different topics every bi-weekly. We have brilliant guests, many of them on the younger side. Listen, I get so amped up after every podcast because, there are a lot of things to be down about in this world. If you read the news, you're like, whoa, wars and financial woes and housing and even mental health itself right now is such a struggle for so many. However, this is a podcast full of hope. And I leave this podcast always with a lot of hope because I see the brilliant young people who are taking these problems on head on. And today's guest is no exception to that. I mean, this young man he floors me. He works so hard and tirelessly, and he's going to tell you more about himself in a minute. Today, our topic, really, we're going to talk about autism and how it relates to mental health, and what a lot of the things that are misunderstood around mental health and autism. And we're going to kind of, as we do, we kind of truth tell in this podcast. We bring on the experts, and in this case, a lived expert. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to our wonderful guest this week, someone that I've been following with great interest on social media because he is so busy and so interesting, Tanner Bergsma. Tanner, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Michael, and thank you for having me. So for those of you guys that don't know who I am a 23-year-old global youth advocate for mental health and social justice. I have been doing this thing for quite a long time now. I don't really know what else to put because I tell people this all the time. I am shy, and if you want to know more about me, just Google me.
100%, man. It is not hard to find out more about Tanner because, like I said, he works tirelessly. He's a lived expert in what we're going to talk about in so many other ways. I had the great pleasure when I first started this job, Tanner and I touched base, and he had the courage to share with me some of his life story, and it was quite touching and quite inspiring. And he inspires people daily in all the different talks that he does, whether it's a TED Talk, whether it's Jack Talk. He's quite often talking and sharing and inspiring others. Tanner, many people who are diagnosed with autism later in life describe a rewatching of their entire past through a new lens. Before you had clarity, what was the mental toll of trying to fit yourself into labels that didn't quite fit? And how did finally getting the right diagnosis change your internal narrative?
It's a very good question, and I'm getting a little teary-eyed because I think about this a lot. I was diagnosed in 2024 in December. Prior to that diagnosis, I grew up always feeling like something was wrong with me. I was always being told something was wrong with me. And I never really understood that my struggles were because I had really no control over them. Like, I knew I had no control over them. Um, I knew I had trouble socializing. I knew that I never really fit in, but I was always pushed so hard trying to, make friends, or, trying to, why don't you act normal? Why don't you do this? Why are your, I would always go outside, and I would literally, my hands would freeze, like I would go blue. And many people were like, oh, why are you like that or whatever? Only to find out later in life that yes, I do have autism, and later in the life, as I began to learn more about psychology and stuff, I kind of had a feeling. That's why I pursued an assessment. But now I look back at my life, and everything that I've been through just replays, and it replays and it replays and it replays constantly. I like to understand what was my autism and what was people, what was people versus what was actually me. What kinds of things did I have control over? What kinds of things I did not have control over? I think there's a lot of stigma just around autism in general and just thinking that we're just, you know, like I was always picked last on the team. I was always, I was constantly made fun of because I was not the normal one. I was always being asked, why aren't you normal? But it was like, it made me feel worthless. And, I never really had a lot of friends growing up. So and I didn't mind that, but it was just, had I had somebody to understand me then, I probably would not have been as traumatized as am now. But with that all being said, I mean, it takes a huge toll on you. And, that's why we have over 70, it was 60 or 70% of people with autism have come out with PTSD of some sort. It's, it's bound to be expected. I tend to go in flashback a lot. Um, but I think the biggest thing is being able to see that, like just because I have autism now, it provided some relief, right? Knowing that I wasn't crazy, that I knew that, perhaps there was a reason now why I acted some ways and, I have different coping strategies and stuff now to allow me to deal with it. So it does take a toll on you, but I think that as I go later in life now, I'll have more clarity and I have more clarity in terms of how I act and why I act the way that I do and knowing how to adapt to that.
How old, can I ask Tanner, how old were you when you officially got a diagnosis?
22.
22. So, wow, 22 years of that. And did you somewhat, like, what pushed you to finally, because I'm sure you had to be your own advocate.
Yeah, no. So it was funny because it was actually my church that found that I was thinking that something was majorly, uh, that I was not, typical, right? And so they
I like
did
that.
push for an assessment to get done. Um, Without their supports, I probably would not have been able to do it because it was like $4,000 to get done. And that's the reality in
Jeez,
today's society is that there is no supports for people um, after 18 for those who have autism. And to get diagnosed, it's insanely a lot of money. And many people go
for
in their
sure.
lives without having diagnoses. But they knew something was wrong, and that's why I was pushed because I was struggling a lot. I was homeless at the time, and they needed to understand. So it was an entire year worth of trying to go through the process and going through these. It was constant back and forth between two different cities trying to do these assessments and stuff, and it was a year of hell. But I think I felt I felt so relieved when I ended up getting that because I'm like, I know I'm not crazy, right?
Right.
But at that time, it was like, you know what? I kind of knew something was off. They knew something was off. It was like we need to pursue this because it's kind of now or never.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, typical's overrated, my friend. You are, I think if someone tells you you're not typical, you say thank you. In the autistic community, in the autistic community, masking is often described as kind of a survival strategy. Can you explain what that looks like on a daily basis and how it eventually leads to what we call a mental health debt that has to be paid back?
Absolutely. I mask all the time. I still do. I still do. I don't dress the way I want to dress. I don't talk the way I want to talk because I have to be mindful. Like, especially in someone of my shoes, I have to be mindful of how politicians are going to see me. How is the other world leaders see me, right? And so, if not many people know this about me, but I hate wearing suits. I hate it. But I do it because I know that I have to fit in. I know that I have to, you know, um, I know that I have to be able to fit in so that my voice can be taken seriously inside. But that comes with a lot of stigma. Um, it plays a toll on you. It does. Um, some days it's like being trapped in a prison in your own mind, right? And I use that term because of the fact that it's hard to not be yourself for so long, right? You know, you can be yourself around no one, but you can't really be yourself. And I think it extends beyond just autism, right? And just in life in general. People's always stigma of how you should behave and how you should act. But for me, I'm always having to be hyper aware of it. You know, am I speaking properly? Am I saying things properly? And sometimes I'll slip up and then I get called out for it and or humiliated for it. And then I'm like, oh crap, you know, then I feel bad. Then I have to like, it's just this constant on edge all the time. You know, I speak my mind. I'm very blunt in how I talk. But sometimes people don't appreciate that. And then I come across as rude or disrespectful when I didn't mean to be that way. So I'm always having to be careful of that. um, it's not something I currently have been able to get over. And I think as somebody who ha has autism, it's as somebody who has autism, it's a process, I think, for me. And I think I'm just trying to learn how to go about that. And I think that the biggest thing that people need to understand is not to judge, but try to be inclusive.
Tanner, for someone who doesn't like to wear a suit, I got to say, you pull it off. You're looking good, and you wear some nice suits. And I hear what you're saying. Around that too, and the toll that it must take. Um, put a lot of pressure on your shoulders, and you know you've got people counting on you. It's tough. But let's talk a little bit about that because you do so much. You do so much. Let's talk about autistic burnout. For someone listening who feels totally depleted, how can they tell if they're experiencing clinical depression or if their autistic brain is simply shutting down from sensory and social overload?
I think that that question gets pretty complex because sometimes you have people that are not diagnosed with autism, and so you don't really know if you are reaching burnout or if you are clinically depressed. Clinically, depression happens for long periods of time. Usually, that would be major depressive disorder, which would be something completely different. And I am not a social worker. I would recommend that you do get professional and clinical help because that's not why we're here on this talk. However, with that being said, um, autism burnout can last for short periods of time or it can last for longer periods of time. Sometimes for me, I can reach chronic burnout. So sometimes it might last days or sometimes a week or more. Doing what I'm doing, yeah, I burn out typically longer and sometimes I won't respond to people for quite a significant amount of time for that reason. Um, Many times it feels like noises and everything gets overwhelming for me. People talking gets overwhelming. My own voice gets overwhelming. Lights get overwhelming, and I will shut down. I like I'll get migraines. Like yesterday, I was going through one. Right, so like it happens often, and I think the biggest thing is being able to, when you recognize that you're at that point, like withdraw. Like for me, I've had to, when I'm like that, I do withdraw. And sometimes that might mean going somewhere quiet, and sometimes that might mean, you know, I carry around a bunch of fidget toys, so sometimes it might mean fidgeting with the squeeze ball. Or sometimes it just might mean being able to just take a walk in nature, you know. But even sometimes cars get overwhelming, and so if I'm somewhere in the city, then I will usually, if it's not too far, usually will treat to my bed and go home and sleep. That's typically the way that I've always had to deal with it. But when I wake up, I'm better. So depression happens for a lot longer, and sometimes you may not be able to pinpoint exactly why you're clinically depressed and stuff. Like I had major depressive disorder for a while, given everything in my past. So the way that I've deciphered it was being able to understand when lights and stuff were too much, and sensory overload was probably my number one indicator that I was going on burnout. The other thing was everything that I would do would start getting scattered. I was just going through this recently. Everything that I was doing was like getting scattered. So I usually like trying to break down and be organized. So usually I'll go and rest, get some sleep or whatever, and then I'll come back and I'll reorganize to a T, right? I will have to-do lists and things are getting organized. But if somebody's depressed, sometimes you will have no motivation. So you might not even feel like you can do that. And then at that point, I would ask that you would seek help in whatever form that may mean.
Thanks for that. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Angelica with Jack.org. Right now, too many young people are struggling with their mental health and they don't always know where to turn. Every donation to Jack.org helps change that. And right now, there's a limited time bonus. Every $25 donation enters you to win a luxury wellness getaway for two, valued at over $10,000, thanks to our friends at Salty Retreats. Visit jack.org/salty to enter.
And we're back. Let's talk a little bit about self-advocacy. What does it look like for an autistic person when they're in a mental health crisis? And how do you tell a doctor or a friend what you actually need?
It's a lot easier said than done. Um, I can recount the plethora of times that I've dealt with mental health where I can tell you that I suffered with ideation, and the first instinct to go to is to shut everyone away, right? That's the first indicator that I often feel. So asking for help is never an easy thing. Um, Usually with autism, I usually keep my circle of friends very small, right? And it might mean that I have friends for or three, two or three good friends that I know that I can count on. And I do that for my own safety, for my own emotional safety and whatnot. So usually the first thing I go to is I usually call them up and one of them up, and I'll usually walk through um, with them on safety plans if I'm to that degree, or if it's less than that, then some resources. But I won't go without them. I think the biggest thing is that sometimes it's hard trying to seek help for somebody who is autistic because it's like we're so used to being judged and so used to being I don't know what the right word is.
Are you misunderstood too? Is that like,
Misunderstood.
yeah?
Yeah, misunderstood. So it's literally that level of trust is huge, huge. And we're loyal, and but it's like if we can't if we can't have that type of loyalty, then then we will shut down. So I think the key thing is consistency. And for those that are trying to give support and are working with an autistic person, remember that consistency long term is a key, because often people with autism have a lot of trauma and have PTSD and other underlying issues that cause us to not being able to trust hardly anyone. So we will shut down. So the key thing is being able to be there and being consistent.
Thanks for that, Tanner, and fantastic advice. Now we're going to go into a segment we like to call here on Jack Amplified Talk the Talk. We want to talk a little bit about the social battery. We know why everyone kind of has the social battery with people. An autistic person's battery often drains 10 times faster because they're manually processing every sound, light, and social cue. You were talking about that, all those different things. Talk to me a little bit about your social battery and what that means to you.
I burn that thing out pretty quick.
You get some
Given
backup.
everything given everything that I do, I reach burnout very, 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 very quickly. At the end of every day, I'm done. I'm cooked. Social battery is not what typical people expect. People expect a 9 to 5 job, and pretty much when you get home, you're tired. That's what people would think typically a social battery would be. But it's much more than that. Every single time that I talk with somebody, I'm draining my social battery. It takes time to comprehend what they're saying. It takes time. For me, I can't understand verbal communication through the life of me, or social cues through the life of me. Sometimes I can. Sometimes when my social battery is better, I can determine it slightly. Sometimes if I'm low on the battery scale, it might look like you're talking to a brick wall. Like I won't know what you're saying at all, right? So I think for me it depletes quickly. And so sometimes, most times, 90% of the time I'm not able to pick up. And so I'm just blunt and straight to the point. And people sometimes don't like that. But it's like that's how I tend to sometimes be, right? And so with social battery, for me, I'm always on overdrive trying to understand what you're saying. What are the meaning of your words, and how does that correlate to your actions? Most people, it comes natural. I have to analyze the crap out of it. And if I don't understand it, I'm going to either ask questions, or sometimes, and that's when my battery's high. If it's not high, I'm going to give up and I'm going to zone out. And you might catch me 15 minutes later saying, Tanner, what the heck are you doing? Are you even here with me right now? And I'm going to be like, nope, I was out daydreaming about butterflies. You know what I'm saying? Like, kind of, that's just kind of the way I've dealt with things. And like, sometimes when my social battery is high, I can look it straight you in the eye and have a good conversation. Sometimes if I'm and I can make many sense. Sometimes if I'm low on the end, I'm not making eye contact. You can try all the life of me. You are not going to get me to look you in the eye. I'm sorry. It's never with intent, right? So I try to balance it very much. I try to understand and pay attention to that. Um, and one of the things that I've always, try to pay attention to is what other people are saying to me. Sometimes, most times, 90% of the time, I'm not going to be able to detect it. So having somebody say to me, Tanner, you haven't been responding to me for quite some time, or you haven't been doing this, or you haven't been doing that well. Why is that? Blah, blah, blah. Usually cues me up and say, okay, my social battery is draining a little bit lower here. And it's not just, and then I'll cue in, but sometimes it's just not in a single day. Sometimes social battery can get drained over a week, right? And then I will go into burnout. So it's the key thing is to being able to be monitoring yourself and being able to take care of yourself enough to understand and paying attention to those cues. I'm still working on that. I don't do a good job at it, but I'm trying my best. I
Yeah.
know what to do. Applying it is a different matter.
Well said. Listen, I'll tell you right now, when I go in and I have to work, if I have to give a speech, no problem, right? Like that's okay.
Yeah.
If I have to work a room with a couple hundred people, when I leave that room, I'm ready to collapse. And I remember at first when that would happen, I'd be like, what's going on? I didn't do anything physical. Like, why am I exhausted? And it is that social battery, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, with all those things you're taking in with autism, right? Like it drains that much faster. So
I haven't been able to detect it myself. I'm like, why am I able to give speeches and do TED Talks and do all these other things, and I'll be fine. I won't get anxiety or anything because it comes natural to me. But you throw me in a room with even 30
yeah,
people, I'm cooked. I'm done. I'm out of there. I'll run away. There is no getting me to walk in there. Sometimes when I'm hot, when I'm higher and I'm better, you will hear me networking with all those people. When I'm lower, I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't know why. I'm a science project that way. I never understood it, but
no,
I think that that's part of autism.
it's different. I think you know what I've been asked that too. You give a speech for 500 and you're not tripped, but because I can get in my own head, right? Sometimes almost block out that people are there. I'm looking, but they're not there. So to me, it's not like, and it's a one-way conversation. When you're listening, taking in everything, wondering about the next conversation, having to do that, having to remember, like it's a lot when you're working a room, and it's like anything in life. I tell people is that they're like, "Oh, but you do a good job." I'm like, yeah, but it's still very tough, right? Like lots of us, I think in life, when people say it doesn't come natural to you, or like you were saying about the suit, listen, naturally I wouldn't be wearing a suit if I had a choice, but I know I've got to do this as part of the gig to do this, and you pull it off well, right? It's part of doing that. So you do what you have to do. It doesn't give you an excuse not to do it, but it's harder to do it for sure. I want to one last question, because I don't know how your social battery is now. I don't want to be the guy responsible for training you today. I know you've got a lot of stuff to do.
It's
Um,
okay. It's okay.
it's
I'd
okay.
rather spend my
Okay.
time in doing this than off doing other things. Trust me.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, this is the question that we ask all our guests that come on, because it's a very personal one. There's no right or wrong on this. There's better answers, but not right or wrong. What are your hopes for the future of youth mental health in Canada? Small little question to end.
You see, that's such a big question, and my brain doesn't even know how to comprehend such things. There's so much I could say. Um, wow. Well, I'm gonna break this down into three different steps. Here goes my analytical brain for you. For people, for people that are listening to this, my hope is that you can understand that if somebody is short with you, if somebody is, you know, struggling, that does not define who they are as a person. We have deal in a society where we have stigma, but this whole idea that men don't cry, you know, that, men can't have feelings too, or whatever, um, it only hurts our society. So my wish for society is that we can get beyond that, that we can take care of one another and actually love one another as a nation, as a society. We need it on this earth. Um, our governments need to be putting more money and funds and resources into it. There is not currently enough. And as I believe CAMH ended up stating, they've risen it by 6% in Canada, but we need a minimum of 12% to be able to even get things under control. Obviously, funding is a huge issue, and um, we, as a nation and as countries around the world, need to understand and look at ourselves as not as statistics, but as human beings with hearts, with feelings, with emotion. And until we do, I can look somebody in the eye and say, I may not understand what you're going through, but I can empathize, and I'm here to help you. Until we can say those words to somebody, our earth is not going to get any better. And it is a call to action to society for everyone involved to really look within themselves, to not get angry at the governments, but to look at within themselves and understand that we have the ability and the power to change mental health in youth for the long term. That if we are able to uplift one another, maybe things can be different. But I know, and I'll say with that, I'll end with this. If the youth of this world can come together in unity, then I know that we can make the world a better place. But it starts with us.
The saying, if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? It starts with us. And listen, you are one more of the younger people that I've talked to, one of the young leaders that give me a lot of hope, because you're taking this head on. You're not ducking it. You're going at it. You're traveling around the world with that message, Tanner. Listen, on behalf of everyone that has been challenged with their mental health, everyone who's been misunderstood, I thank you so much for having the courage to come on to share some of your life stories and some of your experience. Thank you for what you do day in, day out. It's so appreciated. And thank you for being a wonderful guest on Jack Amplified.
Thank you.
Well, what do we learn today? We learned a lot from Tanner. Man, it's just, I love listening to him because he is to the point. He's really funny, and, he's real, right? He keeps it real. And we learned a lot about, how people are misunderstood, how we jump quickly to judgment. And remember that. And also that there's so many people with autism that don't have a diagnosis because access is a real challenge, right? And they walk around for their lives thinking that they're not fitting in, or feeling they're not fitting in, and it's not a good feeling. And we also learned about the toll that takes on someone, years of feeling rejected or not fitting in or feeling different, not feeling accepted, the toll that takes on young people's mental health. We can turn that around, as Tanner eloquently stated at the end when he said, if all the young people stand up and take that on we can turn this around. Not to put words in his mouth, but that's what I heard. He left me with a lot of hope. Thank you so much for listening this week. I encourage you to like this podcast, rate this podcast, and subscribe and share it as much as you can with your friends. This is all about information sharing. The more we know, the more we can do. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Jack Amplified.